first of all, I would like to thank the committee for inviting me here, inviting me back to Yin to share a few words of Torah with you. So thank you to Avril Gatoff and Ari Gerber and Marlene Horowitz and Emma Phillips. So I want you to know that I think that this initiative, this YINNSpire, is one of the most important initiatives, not just for the shul, but for the community at large. And I also want to say that I am delighted to see that it is part of LINK, the initiative in South Netanya to organize and to bring together all of the English learning together. I know that Shoshana Baker and her crew has done just a marvelous job, not just bringing in people to speak, but in coordinating so everybody knows what everything is going on. So Yasher Koach to everybody, may it go from Chayil to Chayil. And on a personal level, I want to say that it's been a while since I've been here, and I want to thank you all. It feels good to be back. Now, I have started each of my shiurim to dedicate the learning, the zechut of the learning, to the safe return of our chatufim, our hostages. There are still 130 that are in what has been called Hamas terror dungeons. Also, I'd like to dedicate the zechut of our learning to our pitzuim, our brave soldiers who were wounded on the field of battle, for the safety of our chayalim wherever they may be, as we say, b'yabasha, ba'avir, u'bayam, and really for the safety and the well-being of all Achenu B'nai Israel who are in terrible danger around the world. And may the Kadosh Baruch Hu protect us from our enemies and protect us from our friends. And mostly in this wonderful month of Nisan, this month of Nisim Gluim, may the Kadosh Baruch Hu bring us a swift and complete victory over modern-day Amalek, be they in the south, in the north, or in the northwest. So I have to tell you this. When Avril called me to invite me to speak, I asked her what she wanted me to speak about. And she said, well, that's really up to you, but it has to be inspiring and it has to be about Pesach. And with the same breath, she said, so what's your topic? I need a title, I need a bio, I need a headshot. And I said, really, I get 30 seconds to think about this? And she said, well, we have a schedule. We have to put out a flyer and I have to get in touch with people. But the truth is, I didn't need more than 30 seconds because there has been something that has been on my mind and bothering me for a while, which I decided that I wanted to share with you. Because if I am successful tonight, I will get you to be bothered about it too. So that is my goal as well. So the topic, or at least the title that I chose, is God Too Busy to Listen to Our Tefillot? What is an Eit Ratzon? Now, in the few weeks, when people had told me they heard that I was speaking here, they asked me what the topic was, and I told them what the topic was, and uniformly, their response was, well, it's going to be a very short shiur, because the answer is obviously, duh, yes. But the truth is, I'm not so sure. The Kotzker Rebbe, and I love quoting the Kotzker Rebbe, the Kotzker Rebbe said that he knows that the Kadosh Baruch Hu loves him because he sometimes listens to his tefillot. And even David HaMelech, right, in Sefer Tehillim, was uncertain whether God would accept his tefillot. He says that he hopes that his tefillot, that his prayers will come before him in an Eit Ratzon. Meaning that if it is an Eit Ratzon, then maybe his prayers will be answered. And the pasuk that he wrote is very well known to us, right? It is Va'ani tfilati lecha Adonai et ratzon berov chasdecha aneni be'emet yishecha. So the way it's typically translated is, but as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord, in an acceptable time. O God, in the abundance of your mercy, answer me in the truth of your salvation. Something like that, right? But if you spend time with the Hebrew, trying to parse out where to put the commas, and really what this pasuk has said, it is enormously difficult to translate and figure out what David HaMelech is really telling us. For now, let's just keep it as is. And I will tell you, our rabbis loved this pasuk. We say this pasuk every single day. When we come into shul and we say matov, we say it. Shabbat mincha, before we read the Torah, we say it again. And on all of the regalim, all of the holidays, when we say the Yud Gimel Midot, Hashem Hashem Kel Rafum B'Chanon, we say it again even on Pesach. And Avril, no, that's not the connection to Pesach. There'll be more. So, given the prominence of this pasuk, what exactly are we asking Hashem when we say it? We seem to ask that we hope that his prayers come to us in an eight ratzon. But what exactly is an eight ratzon? Sometimes it's translated as an acceptable moment, or maybe a propitious time would be a better translation. And if you read it this way, what it sounds like we're saying is, God, I hope we've caught you at a good time. I hope you're not too busy to listen to me. Now, regardless of the reaction I got, whether it's true or not, we believe it's true. We believe that God is too busy for us. Let me give you, for instance, right? I'm going to ask you the question. I don't want a show of hands. But when you're sick, I'm not talking about hospitalized or broken legs or diseases that we whisper. When you say Rifa'enu, do you put your name in the Mishaberach, the Yehi Ratzon? And typically you will tell me no. And why is it? Because we don't want to bother God for little stuff, right? We don't. He's too important. He's too busy. I will tell you, the Torah tells us, Ani Hashem Rofech. I am God, your healer. Now, we have a responsibility to go to doctors. No question about that. But we also have a responsibility to know where the healing comes from and to ask from the Kadosh Baruch Hu whether, I ask him to help us and to cure us. I will tell you, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, he says that if you rip your shirt, you should pray to the Kadosh Baruch Hu that he should replace your shirt, or at a minimum, he should sew it up for you or have it sewn up for you. God is involved in everything. As that great Rebbe from Stratford upon Avon in the last scene said, right? There is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow, right? God is involved in everything. So why do we hesitate, right? What is it that prevents us? Maybe we think he has more important things to do. He's running the world after all, right? He doesn't have time to pay attention to my ripped shirt or my sniffles. So we have to ask ourselves the following question. What exactly does God do every day that he's so busy that we don't approach him? Now, I know that sounds like a chutzpahdik question, but the truth is the Gemara asks that question all over the place. So if we could peek into God's Yoman, if we could look into his diary, where would we see the time blocked out? What time would be free? And exactly what is he doing with his time? Now, there is a medrash in Vayikra Rabbah that records a conversation between a Roman matron and Rabbi Yossi ben Chalaf. So the Roman matron, she's called a matrona, we don't know her name, she asks Rabbi Yossi ben Chalaf the following question. She said, how many days did it take the Kadosh Baruch Hu to create the universe? And he said, 6. And she said, and that was some time ago. And he said, yes. And she said, so what has he been doing since that time? So he answers like that, and he says he makes shidduch, right? He spends his time bringing together men and women for the purpose of marriage. Now, just as an aside, he says because it is so difficult that it is like dividing the Red Sea. Now, I don't know what that means, because there's nothing difficult for the Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? He's a kol yachol. He can do everything. So what it might mean is not that it's difficult, but as he is one of the partners with everybody, parent, mother, father, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that this is a task that is matim to him. You probably don't want to interrupt him while he's doing that. But does that really take all day? Right? I mean, all day of his time he's doing this. And it turns out that the Talmud Yerushalmi says, no, this is not an activity that takes the Kadosh Baruch Hu all day. They said maybe it takes 3 hours. Now, just to give you a framework, is that the Jewish day and the Jewish night is divided into 12 hours. You take the amount of daylight, you divide it by 12, that's called day. Everything else, the nighttime when the sun goes down till the sun comes up, you divide it by 12, that's called night. So when they say 3 hours, a quarter of his day is spent making shidduch. So if that's the case, you're going to ask me the next question. What does he do with the rest of his time? There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah that doesn't talk about shidduchim, but it lays out how he spends his day every day. So permit me, it's on the source sheet, but I'm going to read it to you so you don't have to follow in the source sheet. The Hama Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, 12 sha'ot habe hayom. Just like I said, there are 12 hours in any given day. Shalosh harishonot, the first 3 hours, the first quarter, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yoshev v'osek b'Torah. He sits and learns Torah. He goes to morning Seder. Okay? Shniyot, the second quarter, yoshev v'dan et kol ha'olam kulo, kevan sheroeh shenitchayav olam kliya, omed mikisei hadin v'yoshev al kisei rachamim. So the next 3 hours, he sits in judgment of the world, which makes a lot of sense, because you want to learn first and then go into judgment. But it talks about here, judgment is of two kinds. One, he sits down in judgments with midat hadin, which means we get what we deserve. And the rest of the time, he judges us with midat harachamim. Now, we know that we cannot survive, the world cannot survive, if it is judged according to din. So this amount of time that he spends in din is very, 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 very short. Now, we know this is true from another source, right? If you remember the story of Balaam and Balak, Balaam, who was a sorcerer, knew the time that God was angry every day. What does that mean? It means that this is the time that God judges the world with din. And it's a very, very, very short period of time. So they asked our rabbis, right, how long is this period of time? And it comes out to 158,888th of an hour, which comes out to a little bit more, give or take, of a half a second. So a half a second every day is all that we can survive with midat hadin. Okay, so we have now accounted for everything before lunch. So what happens in the afternoon? So it goes on, it says, Shlishit yoshev v'zan et ha'olam kulo mikarne re'amim ad batzei kinim. He spends his time sustaining the world, meaning that he provides food for all of his creatures. And we know this is true from many, many different psukim, but 3 times a day, and sometimes during Birkat HaMazon, depending on the year, so we say, Poteach et yadecha u'masbia lekol charatzon. the Kadosh Baruch Hu opens his hand and he provides for all living things. So what does he do for the last 3 hours? So the last 3 hours, it says, Urevi'it Yoshev u'mischak im halivyatan. So for the fourth quarter of the day, he plays with the Livyatan. Now the Livyatan, or it's translated, I guess, as Leviathan, was a creature that God created, man and male and female. And back in those days, that's all the choices they had. And he was killed, and he plays with the other one. Now, what this means is a shiur for another time. If you would like, it might be back, and I'll talk about the Livyatan. But the bottom line is, he's busy all day. His day is completely accounted for. So now you're going to ask me which question? What happens at night? Right? We know, Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. God does not nap. God does not sleep. He's awake at night. So what occupies his time at night? So the same Gemara asks that question. It says, Ubelaylia ma avid, right? What does he do? So the Gemara gives, this is source 4 for those who are following at home. So the Gemara gives 2 answers, right? One possibility, it says, Me'ein yomama, that he does just what he did during the day. So if his day is divided into learning, into learning, judging, providing, and playing, then that's what he does at night. So that is, apply, wash, rinse, repeat, right? So this is what he does. But the second idea is actually an interesting idea, and I'll read it in the English because it's a little bit longer. It says, if you wish, another idea, say instead he rides on his light cherub and flies in 18,000 worlds, and then they bring a pasuk from Tehillim. So what is that talking about? It's an interesting idea. The Kadosh Baruch Hu, we have in many midrashim, had created 2 kinds of creatures. They created a spiritual, physical creature, which we call man, and they created a spiritual creature, which we call angels. And the Chovot HaLevavot tell us, based on a number of different midrashim, that we all started out the same. We all started out and we're all created at the same process. It's like all ice cream is vanilla in the beginning, right? So the Kadosh Baruch Hu creates us the same and then sets man aside so that he can elevate, right? So what he does at night is he spends time with his other creatures. So during the day, he focuses on us, and at night, he focuses on them. In addition, we know from other places that the Kadosh Baruch Hu does chesed for people. We know that he davens 3 times a day and puts on tefillin. So he's busy. And I know, right, that the next question for me is, I get he's busy, but maybe it would be okay if we were to interrupt him. We call him Avinu Shebashamayim. He is our Father in heaven. And we know that a parent expects their child to interrupt them, and a parent expects to set aside time when the child asks for things. Certainly a grandparent does, right? A grandparent can be doing anything. Right? I'm expecting a neurosurgeon. If the grandchildren comes in and say, okay, somebody take care of this. Right? I mean, that's just the way it works. But it doesn't appear so. Right? The Gemara, in a different place, says, Amar Rebbe Levi, Kol haposek midivrei Torah, v'osek b'divrei sicha, ma'achlin lo gachle ritamim. Meaning, whoever interrupts when he's learning, he essentially is going to be burned in hell, right? It says that he will be burned with the with the coals of a broom tree. So interrupting the Kadosh Baruch Hu, at least certainly during the first fourth of his day, when he's learning, is not a good idea. But, maybe that's what it means. We hope that that he's not doing that. We hope that we catch him when his learning is already done. But you have similar Gemaras talking about judge. I mean, it's all very confusing. So we have to ask ourselves, is there such a thing as an et ratzon? Right? Et means time. Ratzon, we'll have to figure it out what it means. And the Zohar tells us, yes, there is something called an et ratzon. It says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda haktiv. Right? What Rabbi Yehuda says, what is the meaning of the verse? Vani tfilati lecha Adonai et ratzon. That's our pasuk. That's David HaMelech's pasuk that we say all the time. It says, Zimnin de ihu et ratzon, zimnin de lav ihu et ratzon. There is a time that is called an et ratzon, and there is a time that's called not an et ratzon. It goes on, it says, Zimnin de shma, there is a time not to say shma, but there is a time to pray. V'zimnin de lo shma, and there is a time not to pray. Now, the Navi Yeshayahu tells us that there are times when the Kadosh Baruch Hu is more accessible to us than at other times. And that is when he is near. And if we can figure out what that time is, then we can figure out when this et ratzon is, right? And he will have to answer us. Take a look at what the Navi says. Kol amar Hashem. This is what God is telling us. Be'et ratzon aniticha. In the hour of ratzon, they translate it here as favor, I will answer you. Now that we know that there's a time to approach God, right, it brings us to the critical question, which is, what constitutes an et ratzon, and when is it? So to answer this question is really a term of art. And the reason it's hard to pin down, and I apologize to everybody, but I couldn't find another way to say it, it depends on the context. It depends on the context because different contexts will take us down a different path in terms of what this et ratzon is. One idea that is known probably to everybody is that there are different times of the year that are earmarked for certain events or certain feelings to happen, right? For example, we have just spent 2 months saying half of a Mishnah, half of a Mamar Chazal, right? If you go to the Talmud Bavli, source 8, it says, Mi shenichnas av ma'atim b'simcha. That's what the Mishnah says, that when Av comes, we have to begin to decrease our level of joy. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Berei de Rav Shmuel Bar Shila, Mishmei de Rav, the chain of where this idea came from. It says, Kishem shenichnas av Mim'atim b'simcha, kach nichnas adar, marbim b'simcha. So what exactly does this mean? It means that the month of Av is predetermined to be a time of mourning. The events that happened during Av, the destruction of the first and the second temple, the Meraglim, right? All of those things we don't say that they happened in Av and therefore Av is sad. We say that Av is sad and sad events take place then. So all of these things happened in Av because Av is an et ratzon for Avelut. Similarly, Adar is a time of rejoicing and a time when we have the upper hand over our enemies. And Purim took place in Adar because it is an et ratzon for simcha and hashkafa of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Elul is an Eit Ratzon for tshuva, meaning you can make tshuva anytime during the year. However, it is a time of year where we will be most successful because, to use an inappropriate image, it's where all the stars line up, right? It is dedicated to that and to making tshuva. The expression that we have is Hamelech Basadeh, that during that time of year, the Kadosh Baruch Hu is closest to us and easy for us to make tshuva. We are now in Chodesh Nisan. So Chodesh Nisan is an Eit Ratzon for Geula, for redemption. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Atidan Yigael. That in Nisan, we were redeemed by the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and in Nisan is when the ultimate Geula is going to come. May it happen speedily in our day. There's another idea that there is an Eit Ratzon depending on the time of day. Different times of the day are intended or have a tendency towards different things. So, for example, nighttime is an Eit Ratzon for Chesed. It is an Eit Ratzon for Rachamim. That is why we get up at an ungodly hour to say Slichot after Chatzot, after midnight, because that is the time that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has designated as an Eit Ratzon for Rachamim. Conversely, the time of Mincha is an Eit Ratzon for judgment. We say that Mincha is associated with Yitzchak Avinu, and his midah, his characteristic is gvura, is strength, which we say is the midat adin. And when we daven mincha, we have to be aware that we're standing in front of the Kadosh Baruch Hu at a time of din. But the context of specific times being propitious for specific spiritual outcomes really doesn't help us in our question, right? In terms of when we should approach the Kadosh Baruch Hu, hoping that it's an Eit Ratzon. When we daven mincha, we know it's an Eit Ratzon for din, and we need to be wary of that. When we daven Slichot, we know it's an Eit Ratzon for Rachamim, right? When David HaMelech said he hopes his prayers will be accepted as an Eit Ratzon, he must be referring as something else, because if we know going in what it's an Eit Ratzon for, then what is he asking for? So there's another approach to what an Eit Ratzon is, and that it is not a preordained time, but we create the circumstances that create an Eit Ratzon. Let me explain. So Chazal tell us in explaining this pasuk in Tehillim that we create an Eit Ratzon when we come together and we daven as a community. When we come together to daven and pray and praise the Kadosh Baruch Hu, it creates an environment that the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants for us. It is a desirable time, which is another way to translate Eit Ratzon. Avinu Shebashamayim, like all parents, loves to see his children together and getting along. Now, I will tell you, in a week or so, we will be sitting around our Seder table with friends, family, children, grandchildren. The simple fact that we are together brings us joy. Now, imagine that feeling multiplied by every Seder table around the world. Now, in Israel, 96% of all Jews celebrate the Seder. When you go chutz la'aretz, it drops off to about 70-75%. And imagine the joy that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gets when he looks down and sees us all together. Like the nachas that we shep, seeing our children all together. And we feel that it's a special time too. Right? The Mishnah in Abu tells us, Chavivin Yisrael shenikra banim l'makom. We are lucky that we are called children of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It goes on, it says, Chiba Yetera, it is an additional benefit, an additional joy for us that we actually know it. And we know that when we come together as a community, we bring joy to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I know it's been a long time, but try and recall what it was like the first Pesach during COVID, when we all went to the windows and we heard the entire neighborhood out their window saying Manishtana together. And we realized at that point that we were not having a Seder, we were part of a Seder that crossed the entire world. And we were just an offshoot. And we could see the joy and feel the joy that the Kadosh Baruch Hu feels. I will tell you, is the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, has an interesting Rashi Tevot. They say Tzibor needs to be everybody. And Tzibor Tzadi Beit Reish is Tzadikim, Beinonim, and Rishayim. So when we come together as a Tzibor, we have to come together with everybody. Everybody is there. When that happens, it is an Eit Ratzon that the Kadosh Baruch Hu accepts our prayers. So Chazal explain our pasuk, V'ani tfilati lecha Adonai et ratzon, as David HaMelech, who was davening by himself and said, please, Kadosh Baruch Hu, even though I am davening by myself, I want you to accept it as if it was an Eit Ratzon where I was davening with the entire tzibur. But this doesn't help us either, right? Because if what I said is true, and I'm pretty sure it's true, why in the world would we say this pasuk when we're davening in a tzibur? Right? You come in, you know it's an Eit Ratzon because you're in a tzibur. So why would the rabbis have us say, V'ani tfilati lecha Adonai et ratzon, when we're in shul or just entering to shul, and make it sound like it's a question? That doesn't make sense. So maybe we need to rethink what this Eit Ratzon means, right? And maybe we're approaching it all wrong. And that is that there's a way to think about this a little differently. So does anybody have a guess when the most Eit Ratzon moment is? Mila? Good guess? Anybody else? The Zohar says this. It says Tachazi. In the Gemara it says Tashma. In the Gemara, in the Zohar it says Tachazi. Not come learn, but come see. Because Shita Yama de Shabta, Kad Mata Shata de Tzlota de Mincha, Dina Takipa Shalta, Bekol Dinin Mit Hirit. That every day of the week, when the time of Mincha comes, like we said before, it is the time of Din. Okay? And Din is aroused in the world. Aval. But Yoma de Shabta, but on Shabbos, Kad Mata Idin de Tzlotana de Mincha, when Mincha time comes, it then says, Ravan de Ravan Ishtakach. It is the most Eit Ratzon of any Eit Ratzon time. Now, why would that be? Now, I am certain if I asked for a show of hands, and I'm not going to do that, what day of the week you think is the most propitious as an Eit Ratzon, nobody's going to raise their hand and say Wednesday. Right? You're all going to tell me Shabbat. But now the question is, why would it be Shabbat afternoon? Why would it be that the time that the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants the most is near Shalashudas, when most everybody is looking at their watch and saying, when's Shabbos over, right? So why is that the time he wants the most? So you have to understand that Shabbat is designed as a day for us to improve our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu and to get close to him, right? The day is designed not to fall off, but to build up as a crescendo. So Shabbat, as we know, is divided into 3 parts. That you have Friday night, you have Shabbat before Mincha, right? Shabbat morning, and then you have Shabbat after Mincha at night. Most of our Rabbanim said the way we need to look at this is like at a wedding. So Shabbat evening, Friday night, is like erosing, right? It is when you're first getting engaged to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. You have been spending a week busy, and this is the time where you can get reintroduced. Shabbos morning is compared to Kiddushin, when you're going through the commitment. That's why, by the way, one of the reasons why Shabbat morning is all about Matan Torah, right? That's what the Shabbat Amidah is about, and it is there that we are connected. Shabbat by Shalashudas time, it's Rabba de Rabin because it is the Yichud. It is the time when we finally can spend time with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It is looked upon as the height of love and desire between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's why we have Malava Malkas, because we don't want to leave, right? It's very hard leaving the Yichud. And the first Gera Rebbe, the Chidushei Harim, the way he put it is, Kashe alai pridatechem. It is hard for me to leave you, right? That is the pinnacle, the sea of Eit Ratzon. So maybe the Eit Ratzon we're talking about isn't referring to the Kadosh Baruch Hu at all. Maybe the Eit Ratzon that we're talking about is referring to us. The Vilna Gaon tells us the following. He said, the Kadosh Baruch Hu lives outside of time. So how can we say that he experiences time? Time is about change. We know that the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't change, right? So the Eit Ratzon, if it isn't talking about him, it must be talking about us. We pray to the Kadosh Baruch Hu that the time we approach him in Tefillah should be an Eit Ratzon for us. So then the question is, how do you do that? What is it that we need to do to prepare for when we have an engagement with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that we are ready and that it is an Eit Ratzon? So the first rule is to be present, right? We are all very busy and very distracted, and it is very, very hard to concentrate. I was told of one Rosh Yeshiva who told his students that after davening, they should all say Tfilat HaDerech. Because he says, I don't know where you went during Tfilah, but you weren't here. So you should say the bracha that you were out somewhere. Right? The Tur, who was the precursor of the Shulchan Aruch, said that Mincha, davening Mincha, has a higher reward than davening Shacharit. See what happens when I come here, my Hebrew just... Than davening Shacharit or Ma'ariv, or Arvit for easy, and jump. He says it's because we make yeoman efforts to stop the distraction we're going through and focus on the Kadosh Baruch Hu for 10 or 15 minutes during the day. And that is such yeoman effort that the Kadosh Baruch Hu appreciates it so much that we get greater schar, we get greater reward for davening mincha. Okay, rule 2. So we cited a pasuk earlier from Navi Yeshaya that we said, Ko amar Hashem be'et ratzon aniticha. At an eit ratzon, I will answer you. Meaning that he will answer our prayers. What we didn't do at the time is we didn't explain what the Navi Yeshaya meant when he said eit ratzon. Right? Rashi says it means that the Kadosh Baruch Hu will answer you only when you direct your hearts and your prayers to connect to God and the desire to do what we have been asked to do. Another idea that's brought by the Mitzvot tells us that it means when we carry out what the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do, and for the reasons he wants us to do it, that is called an eit ratzon, be'et sheta'aseh ritzoni, the time when you do what I want you to do. And Masechet Avot tells us that, right? Famously, it says, Hu haya omer, aseh ritzono ki ritzoncha. Make his will like your will. And by doing that, you create an eit ratzon. Rule 3, open your heart. This is perhaps the hardest thing to do. So, Rabbi Yehuda Amital, are you familiar with him? He founded Yeshivat Har Etzion in the Gush. And he spoke about how to create a personal eit ratzon for Chodesh Elul, right? That's what he was talking about. But I think his words are true for any time we want to create an eit ratzon. He wrote it in a book, aptly titled eit ratzon. So he says, Omrin b'shem harebi mikutz. So he's going to quote the Kutzker Rebbe. Shehadvarim shelamadnu sheshamanu shekaranu b'meshech hashana. All of the things that we have learned, because he's talking to his yeshiva, during the year, but all of the things that we have learned, because this is a community that learns quite a lot, that are all here, right? That we have committed intellectually. He says, Munachim heim al halev. They are sitting on top of the heart, right? In other words, we haven't integrated them into our emotional knowledge. Heim yocholim likanes pnima. Understand that all of these things that we have learned, that we think, that we feel, can enter in internally, that we can integrate them into who we are. Hava nidatzel et ota eit ratzon. But you have to take advantage of that time. Hava nistach et libeinu v'ne'efshar lechol otam devarim shelamadnu likanes el halev im niftach anachnu et sharei halev. He says if we go through the effort to open our hearts, all of the things that we feel, all of the things that we know, enter into our hearts and create this amazing eit ratzon, preparation for us to stand in front of the Kodesh Baruch. And he says, if we open the gates of the heart, the gates of heaven will also be opened to my heartbeat in repentance. So we have one last question, right? And that is, because I promised Avril I talked about Pesach, exactly what does this have to do with Pesach? So Pesach is actually the time of year where both of these ideas of eit ratzon come together. It is the moment of the year that the Kadosh Baruch Hu has set aside to do chesed from us. So there's a Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, who's a relatively contemporary Iraqi Mekubal. I knew that Easy would be here, so I had to search for an Iraqi Mekubal, and I found one. He was actually from Baghdad. He was nifter just after the Second World War. And he says, our Rabbi Zichrono Livracha have said that the Seder night is an eit ratzon forever. There's a Hasidic idea from this Rebbe Mordechai Leifer, who says it's not only an eit ratzon for everything, it's an eit ratzon for every Jew. We have the opportunity to create an eit ratzon forever we want. So, Rabotai Gveratai, in just a few days, it will be an Eit Ratzon. It will be Leil HaSeder. Im Yirtz Hashem, we will be sitting around the table with everything prepared. In this life of uncertainty, I am certain of the following. There will be no chametz in your homes. The charoset will be prepared. The grain will be grated. There will be matzot on the table, and the divrei Torah, certainly from the grandchildren, will be insightful. Everything physically we need to be done will be done al pi halacha, as I have come to expect from this community. No ifs, ands, or buts. But before you start your Seder, there's one more thing you need to do. You need to ask yourself the following question. And how you answer that question depends on whether your Seder is going to be effective or not. Right? And this is, will my Seder take place during an Eit Ratzon? More precisely, have I prepared myself spiritually and emotionally so that this Seder, I can create an Eit Ratzon? Have I prepared myself and everybody around me sufficiently so that the Borei Olam will hear and accept my tefillot? Everything, and I mean everything, in the Seder is designed to create a bond of love and yearning between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Will we be prepared to take advantage of that moment? The Kedushat HaLevi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, said the following. He said, the Leil Seder is an Eit Ratzon where there is potential to receive Shefa Rav Shel Kol Tov, an abundance of everything good, everything the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to give us. Will we be able to say at the end of our Sidarim that which we say at the end of every Shmona Esrei, that we say every day? Yihi l'ratzon imri pi v'yagon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'goali. May the words of my mouth and the prayer of my heart be l'ratzon, be acceptable to you in a way that brings us closer to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Please allow me to wish you a Zis in Pesach, like they used to say where I come from. Chag kasher v'sameach.